My guest today is Zach Klein. Zach is the city attorney for the city of Columbus. Before being elected into this role and being sworn in on January 1st of 2018, Zach was a member of city council and actually served as council president in 2016 to 2017. In this episode, we talk about a little bit of everything from his upbringing to his work on city council to the work he does now. We also talk about a wide variety of other issues, some that are facing Columbus directly, like nuisance properties, to even briefly talked about the data breach. But we also talk about other things like his passion for refereeing basketball games and his passion for basketball in general. All that and more on this chronicle of the Columbus Chronicle. Zach Klein, thank you
Yes.
so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I would love to know your history. How did you end up here in Columbus, Ohio?
Well, I'm honestly, Connor, a lot like you. You're not from Columbus, but you find your way to Columbus. I grew up in, well, let me start by saying my dad built power plants for a living. And when you build a power plant, it takes about 4 years to build a power plant. So uh, in my early years, every 4 years, we moved. And we moved all over, and then ultimately settled when I finished 7th grade. We moved to Belpre, Ohio, which is on the river across from Parkersburg, West Virginia. And I call Belpre my home because I was, 12, 13, going into 8th grade, kind of your formative, years that you remember. And so I went to Belpre High, and that's why I say I call Belpre my home, but graduated the class of 97, played in the state tournament, captained the basketball team. Basketball's big. My dad was 6'7", my mom's 6 foot. They both played small college basketball. So it's like you have to check the Klein box and play basketball in some form. And so just ended up in Belpre, which was a great place to grow up. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's a small town of about 5,000 people. Most people would recognize it either like it's next to Parkersburg, West Virginia. We share 2 bridges, and the others people would be like, "Oh, I went to OU and I saw the Belpre exit," because it's 30 minutes to the east of Ohio University there in Athens. But we being a small town, Parkersburg was where all the action was, and I remember when Parkersburg got an Outback Steakhouse that we were pretty excited, like, "Oh, we got a place that we can go to homecoming or prom. This was great." Uh, but it was a wonderful place. But then ultimately, I went to Butler University for a year and a half, thinking that I was gonna maybe play basketball there. And by the way, this is before Butler was good. Um, and so I got the absolute snot kicked out of me in the practice I was there, and realized I'm not a Division I athlete. So I ended up transferring to Ohio State and graduating from Ohio State.
So I read somewhere that your parents were a big part of your upbringing.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, like my brother my brother Patrick is 5 years younger than I am. We're just the 2 of us. But my parents, they sacrificed everything for us. We were very fortunate. We always say that we won the parent lottery, because mom and dad, they did everything. Um, and they really set an example, I think, for myself having 2 kids, of like, if I could be half as good as a parent as my mom and dad were to me, I'd consider myself a success. They really weren't involved in politics per se, but they were involved in the community. They're really involved in our school. My mom worked the concession stand for the Belpre High School games. Uh, she worked the shoot the hoop, which is, you buy a ticket, and if your number gets picked off, you can shoot a half court shot and they win a couple $100 sort of thing. But they really set the gold standard of what it's like uh, to give back to your community, to be in your community, to make a difference in your community. And that really stuck with me about the type of impact that you can have. But they were just my dad passed away, unfortunately. He died of COVID, um, in 2021 on Father's Day, and it was obviously a surprise, just happened fast, and mom is still here and in great health, and she's wonderful and a big part of my kid's life and still part of our life. We try to do Sunday dinner every Sunday with my brother and now his new wife. They just got married 2 weeks ago. And so family's very important. Family's very important to us.
How did you and your wife meet?
So I went to Ohio State.
Yeah.
And her cousin, I was a biochem major, thinking I was going to be a doctor or a surgeon. Fast forward, spoiler alert, it didn't work out. um, but I was taking I think it was either inorganic chemistry or organic chemistry. I can't remember the class, but her cousin randomly sat next to me in class, and I got to know him, and we became friends. And if you remember, back in, not date myself, whatever, when you remember back in college where you get those pamphlets where it's like for spring break, if you get 2 people to go to Cancun, it's $1,000. If you get 3 people, it's $700. If you get 4, that sort of thing. So they're like, "Hey, we have 3 people, we need 4. Do you wanna go to Cancun for spring break?" And I was like, "Yeah, you seem like nice people," you know? So what happened was, her brother, my wife's brother, was one of the people that went. And I didn't know him, but I met the brother, and the brother and I became friends. And then next thing you know, they're local, they're from Columbus. Uh, the next thing you know, they're like, "Oh, come over for dinner at our house." Big Italian family, cook a lot of pizzas and stuff. And I was like, that's when I met Jenny, my wife. And I was like, "Oh, she's fun and cute." And then next thing you know, fast forward several years, we dated and like talked or whatever. But eventually came around and started dating, and now we've been married since 2007.
So from OSU to before you got appointed to city council, what does that time look like for you?
So law school, like I mentioned, I was biochem thinking I was going to be a doctor or surgeon. And I remember I was measuring water in an analytical chemistry class where you have to measure to like what seemed to be the millionth decimal point to make sure that you have the exactly calibrated instrument. And it was summer quarter of my senior year. So I'm getting ready to go into my senior. We were in quarters at Ohio State at the time. And I'm looking outside and people are like hanging out and I'm measuring water and I'm like, why am I doing this? Am I really supposed to be a doctor majoring biochem? So I said, no, I'm not. And I ended up going to law school and ended up going to Capital Law School, which was great for me. Didn't know anyone in my family no one in my family were lawyers. No one I knew really were lawyers. No close family friends were lawyers. So I didn't really have anyone to bounce ideas off of. I just went to the Barnes& and Noble at Lenox, grabbed an LSAT book and took it, and then ended up going to law school and, really enjoyed law school. It was fun. Um, Clerked for a couple federal judges and then got introduced to, a guy named Rich Cordray. At the time, he was the treasurer of the state of Ohio, which is an elected position statewide. He ended up running for Ohio Attorney General. And he called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you want to go work for me in this campaign for attorney general?" And I said, "Great." And that was really my first foray into politics. And so I worked for Rich in 2008, which was a hell of a time to work on a campaign because
Yeah.
Barack Obama was on the ballot, and Ohio was an important swing state. And so Rich, long story short, you can put a footnote here, but he was running in a special election because the previous attorney general resigned. So the election was only 6 months, and because of the resignation, he was the only statewide office holder on the ballot because the president runs in one even year, and then the other even years when the governor and attorney general, secretary of state, they all run. So for example, we just had the 2024 presidential election. 2026 is the governor's race. It was kind of like that. So he was running for a 2-year, the left in the term. But it was great because Barack Obama was on the ballot. So like Jay-Z was in town, Bruce Springsteen, Barack Obama. It was just an amazing experience. And he won the race in 2008. Rich did, as did Barack Obama. And I ended up getting a phone call from a mentor of mine that said, "Hey, do you want to come work at the White House for a year?" And I was like, "Oh, shit, this is a great opportunity, you know?" I was newly married, and my wife's in retail, and she works for a company called DSW, and she, busts her ass to get to where she was in her career. And I was like, "Jenny, I just got this call to go work at the White House." And she's just like, "That's awesome, but I'm not giving up buying shoes for a living for DSW." So I flew back and forth every weekend for a year, and it was hard. It was expensive, but I would take that Southwest flight into BWI on Monday mornings at like 6 a.m. and then take the train to DC, then take the metro to the White House, and then walk with my little suitcase, and I'd rinse and repeat that on Friday nights at 9 or 10 p.m. So I did that almost 52 weeks in a row. And then it was just hard. But it was a great opportunity to serve the president and to serve the country that way. I mean, it's like I'm a kid from Belpre, and I got a chance to fly on Air Force Two and work for Vice President Biden, which is where I was working in the White House. I was working for then Vice President Biden. And it was just a hell of an opportunity. But all good things had to come to an end, and I came back and ended up working for Rich in the AG's office as an assistant attorney general, and he allowed me to be cross-designated and do some federal prosecutorial work. So I was also a special assistant U.S. attorney, did some white-collar crime, assisting some of the full-time federal prosecutors. It was great, but unfortunately, Rich did lose, and that was in 2010. So in November 2010, he lost, and his term expired on New Year's Eve of 2010, and that's when I had the opportunity to join city council. There was, 2 vacancies on city council, and I got appointed to one of the vacancies, and so I ran in November of 2011, for a 4-year term, and then ran again in November 2015 and won. I eventually became council president and then ran for city attorney, and been a city attorney since I got elected November 2017.
Like 14 years now in elected office about.
It's wild.
Yeah, that's what I guess that's my follow-up to that is, like, when you make the decision to do that, what kinda goes through your head? Like, but I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, because for me, like, thinking about, like, running an election, like, and everything that comes with that sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
What goes through your head, and how do you, like, plan that out?
Well, the bug that got planted in me, about elected office and running and campaigning, and this I think is my mom was a teacher, and it goes back to 4th grade and my 4th grade teacher, and this is honest to goodness truth. So Mrs. Burkholtz, called her Mrs. B, 4th grade, St. Mary's, Aurora, Indiana. Uh, we had 1988, we had a mock election, Dukakis versus Bush. It was the presidential election in 1988. And I remember Mrs. Burkholtz, um, put all of Bush, Dan Quayle, Dukakis, Benson, Bush campaign manager, Dukakis, whatever, all these roles, and put them in a hat, and we all went up and drawed something out, and I drew out Bush. And so we had to campaign. You had to learn about one issue that the campaign, and then you had to like work with your campaign manager and your vice presidential candidate and make signs and hang them around school, and then go to all the classes and say, I'm running for president because whatever issue you raised. And they had like an all school assembly, and the school voted. And I remember like that left a big impact on me. It was fun. I loved learning about policy issues. I liked the campaign part of going around the classes, "Vote for me, vote for me." It was just fun, it was memorable, and that little experience of, again, the importance of teachers and the importance of getting exposed all the way back in 4th grade, that really shaped me as like, "Hey, this may be something that I would like to do someday." I don't know what it would look like, but I would like to do it someday. And you don't have to run for office to give back to your community. There's plenty of people that are public servants. They're police officers, firefighters, refuse drivers, people work at rec and parks, people that go in area commissions, block watch. It doesn't matter. Like, but everyone who wants to serve has like a role for them and an interest. And mine was I wanted to get involved on the elected side. And so that's when I wanted to run, but I didn't want to run for the sake of running. I just didn't want to run for like, oh, I'm going to run for this office, even though I'd wake up every morning and be miserable. But look at me, I'm an elected official. I wanted to run where I thought I could make a difference and give back. And that's when the opportunity came for city council. And like, sure, it's a daunting task. It's a big city, but my North Star has always been like, how can I help people? How can I make a difference? And how can I, leave the city in a better spot? And I've been very fortunate to have the voters support me now, as you mentioned, with quick math, 14 years.
Yeah, jeez. Now, going to your time on city council, when you look back at that time, because obviously 2017 to now, I've been city attorney, what do you look back on as like moments that you were like really proud of, or things that you wish you could have changed in the moment?
You know, council is a tough job. And I think people in council, they work really hard. And I've served with a lot of different people over council. And then as city attorney, I've worked with a lot of new people that have been on council. But council in a lot of ways is all of the blame, none of the credit, because, it is a strong mayor system. The mayor controls a lot in this city. The mayor is the CEO. We don't have a city manager model. And so a lot of the decisions, 90 90+% of the decisions come from the mayor or the mayor's employees, the administration. And then councils meeting on Mondays at 5 p.m., there's certainly have a role to play in the legislative oversight and passing legislation to support the mayor's agenda, but they often get the blame of decisions that the mayor may make, good or bad, or sometimes they may get credit for some things the mayor. So it's a little bit of give and take, but the council's hard. Um, but I will tell you, I don't think that I would be as nearly successful city attorney if I wasn't on city council. And I'm not saying that every city attorney must be on council before. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is being so involved in council and eventually being the council president and understanding the issues, understanding the players, understanding the neighborhoods, understanding the community leaders, the faith leaders, the business leaders, the labor leaders, like that, like it's a big city.
A lot of leaders.
It would, but it's a big diverse city. There's a million people that live here, and there's a lot of different interests. And hitting the ground running allowed me, like having that background allowed me to hit the ground running, as being the city attorney. But when I first got on, I remember the pools were closed because of the Great Recession, but the money was very tight. And Mayor Coleman at the time, there was in 2009, the voters of the city of Columbus agreed to raise their taxes to invest in the future. So I like fast forward by the time that money started cycling in 2010, I joined in 2011. There was like we're starting to see an uptick in revenue as the economy came around, plus the 2.5% income tax. There's a little bit extra money, and like just seeing the lack of opportunity, some of the opportunities in the summer, the pools being closed. I work with Mayor Coleman, and one of the very first things I did, because I chaired Rec and Parks Committee, it's like, how can we reopen these pools? And like I remember going to some of those pool openings and just how happy the kids were. Like, and just being a new council member, it was like that was really important.
You
Really
can see the
important.
direct impact of your
See
work.
the direct impact. And that, Connor, that's like something that I think is really unique about local government. And this is nothing against state government or federal government, but you can really see the immediate impact of the decisions you make, good or bad. And that's everything from, I need refuse, skip my house. There's a pothole in front of my house. Or can you help me because my best friend's in an abusive relationship and her boyfriend's beating her up, and from a prosecutor. Or hey, my family lives next to a drunk house and there's gangs and there's guns all the time. I just want my kids to be able to play in the front yard, and everything in between. And you can pull the levers of government at the local level and immediately solve those problems. And not that you can't do those at the state and federal level, but like I think it's just as the ship gets bigger, it's harder to see the
More
impact.
layers.
Yeah, with the exception of this president, which you can see some pretty immediate impacts. But you in local government, you really can see the impact pretty quickly, and it's really rewarding. And it's, I think, the purpose of public service is how you can give back, make a difference from your community. And that's what I've been so fortunate to have the voters support me, but I also why I love my job.
Yeah. I always tell people who feel very disinterested in politics about voting, it's like, you don't have to vote in your national elect. If you don't wanna vote in your national election, don't, but, like, vote in your local. Like, that is where you will see the immediate change that will trickle up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, not to divert. Question for you. And correct me if I'm wrong, were you always a Democrat, or had you always grown up? Because I don't know if I read somewhere that you had done campaign work, like, for Republican, or have you always just kinda worked on the Democratic side of things?
So like as I mentioned, growing up, we didn't talk politics and didn't really have an idea, like per se, whether I was Republican or Democrat personally. And so when I went to Ohio State and switched to political science, I took a campaign politics class. Was one of the classes I had to take because I switched my senior year, and so I had to like cram in the political science classes in order to graduate in time. And so I took a campaign politics class, and I was like, well, a lot of my friends and their families were Republicans, so maybe I'm Republican. And so ended up working for, got in that class, got moved to Pat Tiberi's campaign. So I worked for Pat Tiberi in Congress as part of this political science class. And so I technically got involved in Republican politics because that was what campaign I got assigned to. But it was when I went to law school and really started kind of thinking about politics from a legal standpoint, from a policy standpoint, where I'm like, and plus George W. Bush was running for president at the time. And I'm like, I'm not really sure this is like the right person for me. And so kind of coming out of that law school shell, I was like, I'm more of a Democrat than I am a Republican. That's when I started getting involved. Mayor Coleman was thinking about running for governor at the time. That's when I started getting involved, for Rich Cordray, and got involved in Democratic politics, really since at this point, 23, 24 years ago.
Now, I want to shift over to your time as city attorney from 2017 to now. One of the questions I wanted to ask is because I know you deal with everything from human trafficking to nuisance properties. What is one issue that you deal with that you think is underreported or doesn't get enough of the limelight? Or I shouldn't say the limelight, that's not the right word, but doesn't get enough attention?
And I'm concerned about homelessness and the future of homelessness in this community. I mean, you just saw Trump declare kind of war on homelessness and wanting to take people into, I guess, insane asylums, according to Donald Trump. I'm not really sure, but I think what we're seeing is a financial hit to funding in the human services homelessness world, that trickles down into quality of life, neighborhoods, plain old good respect for fellow human beings. And I think when you see what other cities have done and where they failed, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, they've kind of become poster childs of what you should not do with homelessness. Like, we have to get our ducks in a row in a community to make sure that we are compassionate and have the resources for those who are homeless, who don't have housing, um, both on the family side and the individual side, because I don't what we cannot have happen, I think, is like where you want tent cities in our parks or on, major or any sort of street, residential or commercial, because that will, kill life and commerce and vitality. And I witnessed it firsthand when I was in Seattle. I went to Seattle for the first time on the back end of the pandemic. Uh, my wife and I flew out there. I'd never been to Seattle before, and I remember walking from our hotel in the downtown area to, I think it's called Pike's Market, where they throw the fish and catch
Yeah,
the
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I've been there. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
cool, cool
it is a
place.
cool
Yeah.
place, yeah. But we were walking in, like, one of the streets, there must have been hundreds of tents. You had to walk in the center of the street because the entire sidewalk was, and every shop boarded up. There was no commerce, no jobs, no economic output from that neighborhood. And one guy was, I'm assuming he was doing drugs, because he had a spoon and a lighter, and he caught his tent on fire, and the tent started fire, and then the fire spread to the next tent. And it's like, what's going on? Like, the fire department came. You don't want that in your city. That's not good. But at the same time, like, you also need compassion.
They're people.
They're people, and you have to treat people with respect, and you have to have resources for where they can go. So it's like almost like compassionate enforcement. You can't allow people to do that, but you have to give the resources and give them an outlet to have something else to do, like a place to go. But like, I worry about homelessness, and especially in light of funding, with the federal government cutting off funding, with funding getting tighter, of like making sure that we do take care of the least vulnerable, because it does have an impact on the future of the city of Columbus and vitality and economics and jobs.
Yeah. You mentioned Trump a couple times. Can you talk about your lawsuits, right? Yeah, your
Yes.
lawsuits against Trump and kind of the premise of those?
Yeah. So I think at this point, you may have to fact check me, but roughly we have not 9 active cases against Trump, and we're 9 for 9 and winning. And believe it or not, like, even though I am ideologically opposed to Trump, these lawsuits really aren't ideological per se. What they are lawsuits because real money has been turned off to the city of Columbus for illegal reasons, and that's money that funds programs in the health department, like immunizations and contact tracing, money that goes to our police department for various things like counterterrorism work, uh, money that comes for street paving, whether it's in Franklinton or Linden or anywhere else, Clintonville, any in our community, and everywhere in between for the as big as city. So, like, this is real money that the city relies on to pay people to provide services or to actually do work like paving, or streets, that Trump tried to take away from the city, for what we believe illegal reasons. It's the Congress appropriates money, how a bill becomes a law, Congress appropriates money, and the president, doesn't have the right just to say, well, I'm not going to give it to you, even though Congress appropriated it. So we have been successful. So that's why when I say it's not ideological, even though I'm ideologically opposed to Trump, is honestly, it's just pure money that's coming to the city of Columbus. And he's trying to prevent cities like from Columbus from having these resources that fund so many services that make Columbus great, that go to neighborhoods like Franklinton, where we are right now for this filming. And then there's a case that involves healthcare. We were involved in the first Trump administration where Trump tried to sabotage and undermine the Affordable Care Act, shortening or eliminating the window for people to sign up, jacking up premiums, messing with people's Medicaid and Medicaid expansion. Well, we won in 2000, I think it was 2019 or 18, and Trump won. And he tried again, the same old playbook. Remember, repeal and replace didn't work, so they just took matters in their own hands in the executive branch. And we've sued them and got a good win to prevent him from jacking up premiums and kicking people off health insurance, which is important. You got to have your health. You want people to be good moms, be great moms and dads, to get a job, get an education. Like, at the basis of that, you got to have your health. And if you're making it harder for people to have good quality healthcare coverage to take care of themselves, then how can you expect them to get a great job or get an education, get retrained, be a great mom and dad? So like at the basis of that, you got to have your health, and he's been screwing with that, and we had to step in with litigation and have won so far.
Yeah. In terms of some of the things as city attorney, one of the things I wanted to ask about was like nuisance properties, because I think people see like a nuisance property is like going in and just closing it. Can you? I feel like there's a lot more to that.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what that looks like, what that timeline looks like when you guys have a nuisance property and what that is? That was one of the questions one of my buddies asked. Was like, I'm really curious, like how that all works. So can you give me some background?
There's no one size fits all solution. So there's typically two types of nuisance cases we'll bring. Um, well, technically three if it's a combo of the first two, but it's usually like code based. So it's an unsafe structure, or like there's the place has fallen down. There's issues that with the safety of the structure itself, or high grass and weeds or something like that. The second is safety from a public safety, like shootings, gangs, drug overdoses. Then the third, I guess, being a combination of structure and safety. And so my philosophy since being city attorney has always been, I want to work with people uh, to fix the problem so that we avoid litigation. If you find yourself in court with us, 9 times out of 10, and I'm sure someone can say, "Well, what about my case?" I mean, but 9 times out of 10, generally speaking, it's because you have received code violations or notices from police, or some notices from my office, or a combination, but there's been no action on your part to deal with it. So we have no choice but to file a lawsuit. And then we use the court process to abate the nuisance, to change the behavior, to clean up the property. And so like that has been our approach. We have filed a record number of nuisance abatement cases since I've been city attorney, because I'm a firm believer in improving the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And being the city attorney, I'm not, the police don't report to me, the fire department doesn't report to me, and I'm not city council, but I do have within my purview the nuisance abatement law. And this is something where I can, exercise my authority as city attorney to help clean up neighborhoods, to do my part. And so you file a lawsuit, and then once you file the lawsuit, unfortunately, litigation, it can take time. That's the rub for all litigation, and people get angry about the slow pace of things. But we try to figure out solutions that, once we have people's attention and you're in court, like, okay, how can we fix this problem? How can we help you? Um, or, how can we drop the hammer? And so some of that may be like an agreed upon entry where you're like, both sides agree that you're going to add lighting, you're going to fix the roof, you're going to maybe hire special duty, all the way up to we're going to close the place for a year. Now the city really doesn't take people's property. Like, we can put things in receivership, and if certain criteria is accomplished, that's more the exception, not the rule. But we can like, if you're a landlord, shut down your property for a year so you can't rent it, and that obviously hits your pocketbooks. You're not collecting any rent for a year. So we do have penalties and the ability to do certain things within the purview of the environmental court. Now, I will say, we did start a program especially for seniors that are aging in place that own their home. It's called the Owner Occupied Initiative. So, like, this is a program that started because we've noticed, this is when I first became city attorney. It's like you got all these seniors, older folks have lived in their home their whole life. Maybe their home is paid off, but they're on fixed income and they do have a roof problem. They do have code violations. It is a safety. Like, you can't ignore the fact that it's a code violation, but how can we help them fix it? And so what we do is we're able to we do file lawsuit against them. We bring them into court, but we use court and invite like Habitat for Humanity and other social services. And they literally sit in the back, and it's really cool. You can go down. We do the docket once a month, and the judge and my prosecutors will be like, okay, Connor's roofs needs, who can do it? And a not for profit would be like, I'll do it. And so like then they kick the case 6 months, and they'll like come back in 6 months, and in 6 months the not for profit pays for it, does all the repairs, and the senior gets to stay in their home, and the neighborhood's cleaned up, the house is safe, and it's a win-win for everybody.
That's awesome. That's a really cool program. How I guess this is my question, from city council to city attorney, why I feel like maybe I'm wrong, maybe that is a common path for people, but what made you decide to go to city attorney from city council?
So I do like being a lawyer. It's fun. And there's very few jobs that are like the intersection of law and politics, like county prosecutor, city attorney, AG, maybe US attorney a little bit. Um, and so when my predecessor, Rick Pfeiffer, who was kind of a legend in the community, he was going to retire, and he said, "Hey, I'm retiring," and was like, "Hey, I think being city attorney would be one hell of a job," especially because when I was on city council, not only as council president, but also I chaired public safety and working with police. I worked with the city attorney's office a lot, and I was like, I saw what they were doing, and I was like, man, what a great job to be the city attorney. So like, to me, it was kind of a no brainer for me. I honestly have no idea, if any, how many city attorneys were on city council before me. I can tell you the city attorneys I know since at least 1980, none of them were on city council before being a city attorney. Now, maybe some in like the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s. I don't know, but at least in the past 40 years, it's not a very common path.
Yeah, are there any cases as city attorney that have stuck with you over the years? Um, I
Hmm.
don't mean to put you on the spot.
I will say that um, all of the work we're doing against Trump and the administration stick with me because it's, I think, real impactful work of pushing back against some bullshit in Washington. And then equal on on the state side, the work that we're doing in home rule against the state of Ohio, specifically so that cities like Columbus have the ability to pass common sense gun laws, and the state of Ohio wants to make that harder and eliminate the ability for cities to do that. You take a look, pick up the newspaper every day or turn on the TV, and there's gun violence everywhere. And I think one part of that solution is having common sense gun laws, like safe storage. And it's not just civilian on civilian. It's kids messing around with guns and shooting a friend because there's a gun in a couch cushion because mom or dad or neighbor or friend doesn't lock up their gun. And then, of course, suicide. I mean, it's not just homicide. There's all sorts of gun violence that happens that can be completely preventable injury or death. And the state of Ohio has made it really difficult for cities like Columbus to pass laws like that. And so the litigation that we have against the state of Ohio is also really important. And then, the work that we've done, like Sawyer Towers, the big apartment complexes, where we've taken on these out-of-state landlords, these big corporations that they're not afraid to take the monthly check at the first of the month, but then they screw over the people that live there. And we've I think rightfully hit them hard and have recovered money from them, trying to hold them personally accountable, and have been wildly successful in holding these out-of-state corporations liable.
How do you deal with an out-of-state corporation? I've heard that's a very complex, trying to track down the person because there's a lot of LLCs sometimes, or I don't know. How does that work?
Well, look, I'll be honest, I have a great team. My property action team is fantastic, and this is their bread and butter. It's what they do. It's a lot of title search, a lot of research, but you peel back the layer of the onions and you start getting to where they are, and you're able to find who you need to serve, and you serve them. And plus, like, when to some degree, you always have a starting place because there's someone sending a rich check somewhere, right? You always have a starting place where you can look. And so we're able to hold like a lot of people accountable, rightfully so, because they're just taking advantage of people. These We are blessed to have a lot of great landlords in Columbus, people that own property, they take care of it, they take care of their people, they take care of their tenants. But we have some turds, and we're not afraid to hold them accountable.
Yeah. As in your time here, you've obviously seen Columbus grow a lot. I mean, just thinking about what it was, I mean, I wasn't here in,
When did you move
uh,
here?
I moved here in, oh my gosh, 2020.
Okay.
Right, yeah, right in the it's a 2020 and 2021. One of those, but like right in the height of the COVID years. So I had been here a decent amount. I mean, Cosi was here as a kid, so
Oh yeah.
and but just, I mean, my aunt lived here for like her whole life, and I remember she moved away maybe 20 years ago or something like that. So not her whole life, but she, like, when I talk about the downtown mile and the beauty of that, that was just a highway, like a road there.
Yeah.
So it's changed a lot. How do you think we grow responsibly from the angle of a city attorney as you've watched that growth happen over the years? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
So,
Winded question.
yeah, no, it's an important question because when you look at the data from Morpsey and others that we're gonna have several 100,000 more people come over the next couple years. And when I look at the future of the city of Columbus, like the 4 uh, opportunities that I think we have are in crime, education, our education system, housing, and the transportation of people. I think those are the 4 pillars that are going to make or break the future of the city of Columbus. And I think that we have to be bold, take some risks in those areas, do some, don't rely on the status quo, think outside the box as we tackle each one of those 4 individually. And you take uh, our annexation policy, for example. Historically, for the past 50, 60 years, um, maybe, let's say 50, longer than that. So for a long time, since the 1950s, uh, our annexation policy has always been, if you want Columbus water and sewer, you have to annex into the city of Columbus, which is why when you look at a map of the city of Columbus, it's all jagged, it's all over the place. But that has helped us grow into the city where we're not landlocked. There are other cities that are landlocked. Take the city of Cleveland. Like, city of Cleveland is like, it is landlocked. Cincinnati, not fair to pick on them because they have a river in another state below them. But the city of Columbus, it's so ever reaching because over time we've taken a little bit of this township, a little bit of this municipality, and we've continued to grow and grow and grow, which has allowed us to be the city we are today. And it was a brilliant policy that has served us for a long time. But now, because we are an income tax driven city, meaning that we fund police and fire and rec and parks and refuse and the city attorney and the mayor, like all of the 9,000 employees and the services we provide are driven off the 2.5% income or tax that we get on income. Like, obviously, if you're doing nothing but residential, you're providing a service but getting no funding to provide that service. Does that make sense? Because you're not getting the 2.5% if it's a subdivision or just an apartment complex, but you still have to provide all the city services there. So that's the rub now as the city continues to expand 225 square miles, as we continue to grow out. It's like, well, how do we provide police and fire? How do we provide refuse? How do we provide rec centers and everything in between if it's solely just residential under the current annexation policy? Because we're getting spread thin on providing services as the city grows. So my theory of the case there is like, well, uh, what if, a township wants or a development wants to annex in the city of Columbus, where historically is like, yeah, all 100 acres have to come in and, they have to be part of the city. Well, what if we said, hey, perhaps that 100 acres can stay in your township, but here's the deal. 20 acres, 20%, because easy math, 100 acres, 20% has to be housing. Because what you look at is a lot of these suburbs, like, they're not really wanting they're coming around slowly to the housing conversation. They want Columbus to build all the housing and maybe not wanting to happen in the suburbs. Like, some are better than others, to all the folks watching, like, I'm not picking on anybody in particular. But if we can use the power of our annexation policy to say 20%'s gotta be housing, like, here's a menu of housing that in density that is required. I'm not gonna tell you what it has to be, but it has to be within these general parameters. And then the other 80% say they wanna do mixed use or commercial. We can do a revenue share, based on income tax, but that way we don't have to provide the police and fire. We get a little bit of the income tax, and we can drive housing policy, which benefits the regional.
Very cool. Um, kind of a follow-up to that, what do you see I'm trying to think the right way to say this because I'll ask a question at the end about like concerns on the future of the city. But what do you see in your role right now as a big concern for you? Um, in city, I know you mentioned homelessness as something that's not a report, but what do you see right now that you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Well, look, I think crime and the perception of crime, just being the city attorney, we're the lawyers for the police. We're always in that bucket. It's like I am the prosecutor in municipal court. We do all misdemeanor crimes in the city of Columbus. We do not prosecute felonies. We do not prosecute juveniles. That's the county prosecutor. But we do prosecute misdemeanors. So like living in that world of nuisance abatement in the drug houses and neighborhoods and bad businesses where, shootings are happening, comboing that with being the lawyer for the police and supporting the police in their efforts and being the prosecutor. I don't think in a city this size you could ever discount crime, or the perception of crime. Because when you look at a lot of the violent crime trends around the country, including the city of Columbus, they're on the way down, and that's a great thing. But there are, dealing with the perception of people feeling that certain neighborhoods are unsafe, that they don't want to go to downtown or the short north, or they're not going to come to Franklinton because they feel it's unsafe. Like we have, perception is reality, and you have to be able to deal with the perception of crime as much as you're dealing with real crime. And so like that is something that I'm always thinking about, and public safety has been a number one priority of mine, is how do you support police in their mission, to get bad guys off the street, hold them accountable. But then going back to say, as an example, homelessness, how do you have the resources to fund and help people turn their lives around, both within the community, but also when they interact with the court system. So it's multi-levered and multi-complex, but that is something that's always first and foremost as the city attorney, because it's right there in my lap every day.
Yeah. I had a guest on previously, Bobby Ray, the kazoo guy who plays on the street, and he shouted you out when we were not recording, sadly, about like you with the First Amendment, letting like as a busker on the street, as a street performer, kind of defending that right. One of the things I bring that up because I've heard a lot of good things, but one of the critiques that I saw online was around, and I know you probably can't touch much on this around the data breach was around the whistleblower, the gag order. Can you talk to me and give me, like, some background into why that happened and the history behind that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there was concerns of the dissemination of criminal information that is not public and that jeopardize criminal investigations, including the potential names of undercover officers. And that's really the beginning and end of the conversation.
That makes sense. Follow-up to that, not really follow-up, different pivoting. I've seen the reports that, you've raised a decent amount of chunk of change, since May, and you had some on reserve from the last campaign cycle. And I know probably have no definite answer, but I have heard that there's a possibility or maybe a thought of running for mayor of Columbus one day. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm on the ballot this November for my third term as city attorney. And I've said this before, and it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Being mayor of this city would be an absolute honor. Like it is a great job because it is a strong city. Like you're handed the keys to this awesome city with awesome people, terrific neighborhoods, and a lot of diversity and so much potential that we've capitalized on so much. But when you look at the horizon, there's so many cool things that we could be doing in the future, right? And when I look ahead, like what an honor to be the mayor. And so I know that other people share that opinion too. There's other people out there that are other community leaders like that think that being mayor would be great. And that's the beauty of the system we have. I can say like I want to do my best as city attorney, and we'll see what happens in the future. But like those things are like conversations for tomorrow. And like the conversation for today is like, how can I be a good city attorney and help people in the city of Columbus?
Love that. Pivoting like a 180.
180.
You mentioned basketball. I mean, you're a tall guy. You were the only one who had the duck coming up to this attic. You're a ref. You've done some
Retired.
retired ref.
Retired.
Tell me about that.
So, when I was at Butler and I got the shit kicked out of me at that basketball practice and I had to pivot in basketball, no pun intended because it's basketball pivoting, I moved from my random roommate that I was assigned to at Butler. We needed a couch, and he had a family friend. He was from the Indianapolis area, which is where Butler is. That brought over a couch, and we were moving it in, and the family friend was like, "Why are you guys so glum?" Like, "Well, we don't have any money," like every other freshman in the world. They're like, "Well, you guys both played high school basketball. Why don't you referee?" And this guy was a high school basketball referee in Indiana. And I was like, "What does that mean?" He said, "Well, go take your test and you can go referee like 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders on for the Diocese of Indianapolis. I can get you guys games. You referee a game every hour on the hour and it pays like $30. So you referee 3 games on a Saturday, 3 games on a Sunday, voila, $180." I was like, "Holy smokes, that's amazing. You can do that?" So that's literally kind of what happened. We took our test. We started refereeing itty bitty kids, and then I transferred to Ohio State, and then started refereeing intramurals at Ohio State. Uh, and then next thing you know, they're like, "Hey, you're not a bad referee. You should go to this camp." And they're like, "Well, what's a camp? Like, what do you mean referee camp?" And so there are people who this is like the underbelly of refereeing world, right? There are people that conferences like the Big Ten, they hire an individual like Connor to be the supervisor of officials, both on the men's side and the women's side. And during the summer, they have camps where you go and you would evaluate me and others that want to work in the Big Ten or want to work in the ACC or want to work in the Mid American or the Horizon, various conferences from Division 3 and Division 2, Division 1, all, including the NBA. The NBA has people that evaluate referees. And so I started going to these camps, and next thing you know, like, they're like, "You're a decent referee," and I'm 20 years old, 21 years old, and one thing led to another, and I get hired and start refereeing basketball, and I'm refereeing Division 3 college basketball games before I'm even refereeing a varsity game in high school, and along the way, folks from the NBA saw me and they called me up and invited me to go referee in the NBA Summer League. And at the time, I think they solely play it in Las Vegas now, but at the time they did it in Salt Lake City too. So I got invited out to Salt Lake City and refereed. And like I remember if you have time for a story.
I mean,
Okay,
but yeah,
okay, all right.
absolutely.
So I remember my very first NBA Summer League game was in Salt Lake City, and it's played at the Salt Lake City Community College, which is a beautiful facility that seats like 7,000 people. And it's my very first game, and they take their NBA Summer League very seriously in Salt Lake. And like I said, I 23, 24 years old, and it's the Jazz versus the Pacers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so it's a home game for the Jazz fans. And I was so freaking nervous.
You're like right out of college,
Oh,
basically.
yeah,
If
dude.
not in it, yeah.
Dude, I was so nervous. And there's 7,000 people there. I mean, it's like standing room only, Jazz versus the Pacers, and I'm wearing my little NBA referee outfit, and the game starts, and we're like we're playing, and next thing you know, so if you watch basketball game, there's 3 referees on the court. The one at the 28-foot mark on either side of the court is called the trail position. This is like a little referee lesson.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm learning.
Okay, so it's like a triangle, right? It's like a triangle. If you think about where the referees are, it's like a little triangle. The one free throw line extended is called the center position or the slot position, and then the one in the basket's called the lead position. And those positions can range depending on where the ball's rotated and transitions and steals. So you're not always in the lead, you're not always in the center, you're not always in the trail. It varies. So I'm in the lead position, which is where, remember?
The lead position.
Yeah, remember? Underneath the basket. I'm underneath the basket. Yeah.
So one on the either side.
Yeah, underneath the basket. And so I'm a guy drives from the 3-point line in front of me, and I'm refereeing the play, pulls up for a jumper, may have pushed off a little bit. And my memory's a little hazy. It's 20-some years ago. Nothing but net. It was a guy for the Jazz.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe pushes off a little bit, nothing but net, like 20-some footer. And all of a sudden behind me, I hear, "Don't you know what a motherfucking offensive foul is?" And I was like, "Holy shit," you know? So I run down to the other end of the court, and the ball goes out of bounds, and I turn around, and Larry Bird is standing there with his arms out, and he's just, like, shaking his head, and I was like, "Oh, I just got motherfucked by Larry Bird. This is incredible." So, like, the game's over, so I call my mom and dad, like, big Indiana basketball fans. I was like, "Man, Larry Bird motherfucked me. You'll never guess what happened." So it was basketball's been very good to me. I got this I wish that that, like, 18-year-old Zach, 16-year-old Zach would know Zach now for a whole host of reasons, but as it relates to basketball, I just got the opportunity to go to so many colleges and universities all over the United States to referee that I never would have been to, never would have experienced, like West Point, the Naval Academy. Like, I've refereed there, like, they're incredible places that again, being from Belpre or just not being exposed to those cool, like, universities to go referee. But I bet some of my best friends in the world are referees, and I do miss it a little bit, but, I have a 7th grader and a 5th grader, and now I've kind of put my coaching hat on, coaching basketball. So my mom and I coached my daughter, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and then now she's going into 7th. They prefer, like, non-parent led coaching starting in 7th grade,
Fair.
and then I coach my son in 4th and hopefully this year in 5th, which is fun.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have 2 questions for you because I know we're running out of time here. When you look at the future of Columbus, what excites you? What concerns you?
Wait, like, there's so much opportunity in the city to really take the city to the next level or do some big bold things. And it begins and ends with housing, our education system, crime, and the transportation of people. Like, those are the 4 biggest opportunities that concern me, but also the ones where there's a lot of opportunity to do some big bold things. So when I look to the future, in whatever, role that I'm in, whether that's city attorney, or just a citizen of the city of Columbus, so just a layperson not elected. Like, I want to see and be part of that future and those 4 things, because the sky's the limit on everything that we can reach, and I would really encourage everyone in the city to dream and think big, in any of them. Like, doesn't have to be those 4, but, like, really, how can we take this city to the next level? And we shouldn't let, uh, the lack of thinking and the status quo get in the way. Let's do some big stuff. Let's really think big on what can be done, because if you have you're gonna design a city that's an incubator that can get stuff done, it's the city of Columbus, because we're well resourced, we have the right personalities, we have a great downtown, we have a wonderful university to support us, we have a good business community, great neighborhoods, and so, like, that cities beg for that, and we have that right here. You just gotta, like, make sure that recipe's always cooking to produce really great stuff.
Love that. Final question, and I'll leave it for you for any plugs or anything you wanna give. But favorite places to eat, drink, or just hang out in the city?
I'm a big foodie guy. I love food and wine, and it really depends on the cuisine. I love sushi, like finding sushi places. Pascalone's Italian up on 161, is fantastic. I love what Chef Avishar and BJ Lieberman are doing in the city to put us on the map nationally. They're great places. It's anywhere that's producing unique food that's outside the box and pushing the envelope a little bit, like, count me in. I wanna try it. I wanna eat there, because there's just, like, some really talented people putting out some good stuff in the city of Columbus, and if there's a chance for me to eat and drink there, like, just sign me up.
Yeah, I'm a big sushi guy too, so I need to ask, where's your favorite place to go? Because I've been trying to find some good joints.
I'm a big, like, traditional, like, Akihana, love an Akihana. I like Yoshi. I like Yoshi Sushi. I think it's very good. Um, there's a new place up of Polaris that's doing, uh, I don't know the name of the restaurant, but it's up of Polaris that I wanna try, it's supposed to be really good. I haven't been there yet.
Oh, very cool. Zach, you were the first elected official coming on this pod, so thank you so much, one, for coming
Well,
on and
hopefully I
sitting
don't
and
ruin it
chat.
for my fellow elected officials.
No,
Okay.
no. Anything else you wanna add? Anything you wanna say?
Well, I'd be remiss not to say how many great pizza joints there are, actually. So, like, if I'm gonna close on anything, like, we have some wonderful pizza joints too. And so, like, I'm always looking to eat great food. Look, I appreciate what you're doing, bringing people on. I think it's really cool that folks like yourself and others are getting into the podcast space, um, to bring on different people. Like, it doesn't always have to be electeds or like what, because this city is cooking, right? And like you are bringing in, I think, the lifeblood of all these great people that are in the restaurant world or in the community world or in the elected world and everywhere in between, that are showcasing what makes this city like really kick ass and amazing. So keep up the good work.
Much appreciated, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.